This is so challenging that people are finding all kinds of innovative and interesting approaches to try to solve it. The question is that good stuff like this amyloid work, how good is it?
You said that you don't find this to be relevant to the origin of life. I want to ask, is that an evidence-based claim, or is that just your gut intuition?
You know, you're making a very important point. As a matter of faith, not science, I believe that God created the universe.
That's the point that I would have to disagree, and I think is just a false statement.
By the way, I've got a super important announcement with Jimmy Akin at the end of this video.
Yeah, so if I'm understanding, the key argument here, the key point that you're saying here is that evolution cannot explain the origin of things like the genetic code or ribosomes, because evolution depends on those mechanisms already being in place in order to act. And that's the point that I would have to disagree, and I think is just a false statement. And I think that there is plenty of peer-reviewed literature that showing this. So there's a review article on this exact topic that was published in Life, the journal, in 2021. And it's literally, the title is Self-Reproduction and Darwinian Evolution in Autocatalytic Chemical Reaction Systems. It's by Sandeep Amita et al. They do sort of break down Darwinian evolution into requiring a few prerequisites. And those are a self-replicating entity of some kind, and then heredity, variation in fitness effects. If you have all those in place, then you're going to have Darwinian evolution and selection. And you also claimed that you don't get large molecules forming spontaneously. That has also been shown in amyloid chemistry, for example, to form spontaneously in the presence of volcanic gases, very long macromolecules, very stable, don't degrade in water, and have an element of heredity. So yep. I think that there is actual experimental evidence showing that it is not the case that you cannot have evolution before the genetic code or before the ribosome.
Okay. Yeah. Well, we could have a good debate, but we can't do it here because, well, I know the amyloid literature, and I have seen the first paper you mentioned. I don't remember who's the senior author. I think do you know who the senior author is?
Yes, Sandeep Amita.
No, that's the first one. You know who's the last author?
The last one is Shashi Thutapalli.
Okay, yeah, I have seen that, and it doesn't do what you say it does. It requires, actually, you said this. It requires three things. It requires heredity, replication, right? Now, heredity is what I mean by accurate self-replication. Mm-hmm. I have published a paper, which you could check out. It's in Biosystems this year. Just look Garte Biosystems, showing that, yes, you can get evolution if you have a degree of accuracy of the heredity above a threshold. But that threshold is far from zero. It's close to 50% in most cases. So if you don't have any accurate self-replication, I hate to use the word prove, but I did use math for this. And it's clear that you cannot get evolution started unless you have, as I said, not 100%, but beyond a threshold of that era. And this is basically repeating what Eigen did many years ago, Manfred Eigen, who found the error threshold very important. Yes, if you have all those things that you mentioned, that's exactly what starts evolution. But if you don't, you don't. Now, in terms of the amyloid, we can't go into that because that is so technical and would take so much time. And I know that literature, and it's very interesting. All I can say to summarize my view is it's not relevant to the way life could have actually started on Earth. And the same is true for the molybdenum. You're talking about Lee Cronin's work on molybdenum. Is that?
No, not Cronin. This was it starts with an M. Here, I can pull it up while you finish your point.
Yeah, I mean, there are model systems that look very good, that work quite well, that can make long polymers, can replicate those polymers, can mutate, and you You can do natural selection in PCR. I mean, there's all kinds of ways that you can do this. But again, without going into all the details of it, my view, having read that, is that, yeah, that's all very interesting, but it is not relevant to a natural origin of life in a pond or an ocean.
So that molybdenum paper was with Miras et al., and I was just using it to illustrate the principle that you don't necessarily need to have a genetic code and ribosomes in order to have these necessary prerequisites for Darwinian evolution in place. This was even in an inorganic system. That was all I was saying. I wasn't saying that it was actually relevant for abiogenesis. I was just showing in principle.
Yeah, I agree. You're right. You can do a lot of stuff that looks like evolution. I mean, we have things that people call evolution that are outside of life. So what I should have said is biological evolution, which is very, very specific and has a very specific mechanism that you don't find in other examples of what people call evolution, including inorganic chemistry.
I would just ask one final question, because I do think that, for example, in amyloids, I know you don't want to go into the weeds on that subject, but I mean, you do have elements of heredity. I do think it surpasses that threshold that you're talking about of self-replicating accuracy. It does accurately self-replicate the actual sequence of amino acids via templated self-replication. I do think it surpasses that threshold that you laid out, necessary for Darwinian evolution to take place. So, and there have been recent papers last year showing the interactions between nucleic acids and amyloids, which would be the very most rudimentary form of what you would need for ribosome evolution to occur. So I want to ask, is this, you said that you don't find this to be relevant to the origin of life. I want to ask, is that an evidence-based claim, or is that just your gut intuition?
What it's based on, and again, I don't have the papers now and I don't remember everything that was in them, so I can't go into detail, but what it's based on is having read those papers and while reading them seeing, oh, aha, okay, they did this or they didn't do this or something, and thinking, all right, well, that's nice. But, you're making a very important point. And it's actually a point that I think should be stressed. There's a huge amount of ingenuity and brilliant research that's going into this field. Why? Because it's the most difficult subject, I think, in science. Now, of course, I'm not a physicist, so I may be wrong. But certainly in biology, this is so challenging. It is so difficult that people are finding all kinds of innovative and interesting approaches to try to solve it. And there's some good stuff coming out, but the question is that good stuff, like this amyloid work, how good is it to explain how life could have started? And that's the big question. I remember thinking, and again, for the fourth or fifth time, I have to say I can't tell you the details because I don't remember them, but I remember thinking, as in many other such models. I mean, Nick Lane has models. I mean, I don't know how many models you know of, but there are hundreds of models, and none of them are terrible. Some of them are brilliant. Cronin has models. None of them get to the point of where everyone reads them and says, we're there.
Yes. There's no consensus. I will agree with that. Can you clarify, but before I go here, can you just clarify for one last time, like, how it is that you say, okay, there are these multiple competing hypotheses. There is no consensus theory of abiogenesis, of course, right, but there's no consensus theory for quantum gravity either. And we don't say, well, since we don't have an explanation for quantum gravity, that points to a God. So why is it that in this instance, you're claiming that since there's no consensus theory of abiogenesis, then that points to a God? Can you just clarify that a bit? And then that's my question.
As a matter of faith, not science, I believe that God created the universe and everything in it, including life. As a scientist, as I mentioned to Ben, I want to go further than that. I don't just say, okay, we don't have a consensus, so God did it. I believe that God did do it. He did create everything. And as you said, quantum gravity. Okay, that I believe that came from God as well. I mean, quantum theory is almost divine when you look at it. I mean, it's certainly nothing we could think of, right, as humans. It's something incredible. So what I'm saying is that I think that there does exist an actual physical naturalistic theory that will explain the origin of life, but we don't know what it is. And I said this to Ben also, I am going to tell a little bit later some of the things that are hints pointing to what that theory must include. And among the other things that it will include is what I believe is evidence for a creator.
Before we go, we need to remind folks, we need your help. We are in a deficit situation. In 5 months, the bank account would be empty at current rates. The good news is we got 5 months to fix it, and it's a fixable problem.
I was able to donate in about 60 seconds from my phone while I was backstage.
And by the way, he's an agnostic, but he still sees the value of the work that's being done here on Capturing Christianity.
Even if you're an agnostic like me, I just want to encourage you to support. Iron sharpens iron, and I rely on ministries like Cameron's to keep my iron sharp, so I wanted to support the cause.
That's a real testimony. If even people who don't share your perspective see the value of what you're doing and want to help you keep doing it, that's important. Thank you gifts for you. We mentioned everybody who donates during this drive gets the PDF of the Gospel Reliability article. If you donate at the $25 a month level, you get Pat Flynn's book, The Best Argument from God, which has received very high praise. And if you donate at the $50 a month level, you get the sculpture of Jesus based on the Shroud of Turin that is made out of like bronze and iron. So we have those thank yous. Please do use the patron links. You'll find those at the top of the video description, just below where my beard gets cut off by the frame. And if you don't like using Patreon, we also have Donor Box for you. Whatever your preferences is, we try to make it as easy as possible. And as I've said, what happens here on Capturing Christianity is rare. There are not a lot of oases on the vast swamp of YouTube to find intellectual content that is objective and trying to be neutral and open-minded and fair-minded to the different positions, and that tries to steel man the arguments from other positions. In fact, straw men are the rule on the internet. Steel manning is very rare, and especially with the kind of charity that you see on this channel. So this is a rare resource. It really needs to keep going, and for that, we need your help. And thank you in advance for the help that you're able to provide.